Hello. So thank you for attending my conference, which is how to monitor your Symfony application. Okay. I think I'm now. Yep. So my name is Alexandre Salomé. If you have seen me previously, I'm the pony guy. I will now talk about Pony, I'm sorry for that. I'm a software architect at Auchan Retail France. It's a French retail company. And I'm also a 7-year-old developer on Symfony and developer since my childhood. Okay, first I will ask some questions to you to better know you. Who knows about ELK, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana? Okay. Who has already installed ELK or another monitoring tool? Okay, and who is by now running a monitoring tool on his production servers? Okay, great. Yeah, not that much, but it's a good start. Okay, so the plan of the conference. First, we'll talk a little bit about the theory of monitoring, what is good to know about this. We'll discuss about the solutions that exist in the monitoring ecosystem. After that, we'll discuss what's important to monitor on your servers and on your application. And after that, alerting, why it's important to be alerted. And last part, our solution at Auchan Retail France, the solution that we use, which will not be the same as the one I present to you. And I will explain you why later. First, theory. There are mainly, at the current state of the art, two types of data that you can track when you want to monitor what is called metrics and events. First, metrics. Metrics, it's basically a number that changes over time. It's formally known as time series data. So it's a name, like for example, the temperature and the time, today, and the value. Oh, not good. Some examples for our concern, some system metrics, which will be about the operating system and the machine. Service metrics, so it's Apache, MySQL, and things that your application relies on. And finally, your application metrics, which are probably the one that interests you the most. There are some concepts about metrics that I want to talk to you. The first one is the process of aggregation of metrics. The aggregation is simply the process of converting many metrics to a single one. It's very important to know this concept when you want to query your database. Because, for example, if you're extracting your load average on your machine every 5 seconds, later when you query, you will need to do some aggregation. For example, if you query for data over a week. Depending on what you want to know, you will use different aggregations. By example, if you aggregate the maximum value, you will know about what is my maximum load average on a day. If you do mean value or average value, you will know what is my global tendency load average value on the server. So it's very important to know about the concept of aggregations. You don't always fetch all metrics of a day, you just fetch an aggregation of it. It can also be used to reduce your storage size, because when you start getting thousands of metrics of everything, every 5 seconds, you will get tons of data, and it's important at some point to reduce those metrics, because you don't need the very detail of your load average of 1 year ago. But you want to keep data, so you make an aggregation to not lose some information. Okay, so to reduce the storage size, you can use aggregation. Okay, and also always keep an eye on your storage size, because it's very interesting. Okay. Another thing that you should be aware of is the deviation, because some metrics are pushed as growing numbers. It's not always a rate. For example, MySQL provides a lot of metrics, like the number of queries that it gets, but this metric is just a number that is growing. So what you need to do on this is a deviation, and a deviation is simply the change rate of the metric. So for example, we see on the left the number that is growing because MySQL just does +1, +1, +1, +1. And from this value, you compute the deviation. So metric system usually provide a way to do this. The reason for this is performance reason, because maintaining a rate has a cost, whereas incrementing a number is very, very, very cheap for this matter. It's also a system you can use in your Symfony application if you start computing metrics. You can just increment a number. Okay, events. We've talked about metrics, so basically numbers. There is also another type of data that you want to get. It's what is called events or log message. An event is simply a text message. This text message will come from your system, like your syslog, maybe from Apache, the access log, or your Symfony application, your prod.log or prod.log, and any other log that you will want to create in your application. With Monolog, you can create many files and also segment your logs. And every message usually has a minimal amount of information, the date, and the message. Some examples here, the Linux system logs, the Apache Nginx access logs, Symfony logs, MySQL, and slow query logs. Also, I recommend you to watch this. It's very important to know which queries are slow in your database. Okay. An important concept when you receive tons of logs is to extract fields from it. For example, you get from your application some logs like this one. You need to apply regular expressions to extract information from it. In ELK, it's achieved thanks to Logstash. I will talk about this later. And what you do is that you say, okay, I will extract a field with the server, one with the event type, the username, and this. And from those logs that now you have extracted fields, you can make some useful queries. Simply from this log, you can know how many users connect to my application per day. And you can also know how many times a user connects to my application per day. Does he connect 1 time in a week? Does he connect 3 times in a day? It's very important to understand the behavior of your users. Or, for example, how many IP address does my user have? Okay, the most common way to achieve this is to use Logstash. Logstash provides tools for field extractions, but it also provides standard regular expression. For example, the access logs, which contains a lot of useful information about your web activity, they can be processed automatically using Logstash. Okay, if you want to create other rules, you will find a lot of articles on the internet. Logstash is a very popular solution. Okay, end of theory. To resume what we said, metrics are good at time series data, consolidation, mathematics, and storage size. It's basically numbers. Regarding the events, they are good for storing anything, because since it's a text and not a number, you can put anything you want inside it, and later you find it by the text pattern and so on. And it's very useful for extracting fields. So at some points, numbers are not enough, and then you need text. But you must be aware that text is bigger in the storage compared to metrics. Solutions now. There are many popular metric storage solutions that you can find. The most popular one is probably Graphite. It's really used a lot across the world. One key feature for me about Graphite is the aggregation over time. What I explained previously, which is you take all your metrics and you aggregate it to reduce the storage. Graphite can do it automatically. whereas InfluxDB, which is another popular solution, does not this automatically. But InfluxDB is better at clustering. That's when you get really tons of metrics. But InfluxDB is better at clustering compared to Graphite. You can do it with Graphite, but you will have to be a plumber to achieve this. Yeah. Okay, other solutions, I did not have the time to go deeper in it, but they should also be considered when you want to choose a solution. Okay, a good solution for extraction of metrics from your system and services is probably collectd. Who is using collectd? Okay, you're 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. It's very, very good. It has tons of plugins, and you can also go further with the exact plugin. So this is not for your Symfony application, but for the rest of the machine, you can use this. Another solution that I must talk about is Zabbix. Zabbix is at the same time the collector of metrics, and the storage of metrics. What Zabbix is really good at, it's alerting, because it does not only hold the metrics, it also alerts you when some metric go crazy. And you can also create really nice and concise dashboards showing you how your system is going, good or bad. Okay, a really, really good tool also that you must know of is StatsD. StatsD, it's a little application standing on your machine that will act as a proxy between your application or your system and the metric storage. StatsD will hold the metric for some seconds and flush to your metric storage every 10 seconds, for example. By doing this, you avoid having many, many hits in real time. For example, your Symfony application gets, I don't know, 1,000 of hits every minute. If you simply write directly to your metric system, it will be hard for the server to deal with all those small changes, whereas flushing every X seconds will allow him to optimize performance. Okay. And regarding the metrics for your Symfony application, I really recommend you the first bundle, which is in the list from M6Web, a French company. It's called StatsD bundle. I will cover it in the rest of the presentation. Other solutions exist. Just simply put your metric system inside packages, and you will find bundles for it. There is always a bundle for that. Okay, ELK, the so famous ELK, not so famous ELK because you're only 10 or 20 people to know it. The concept is simple. Your log texts are processed by Logstash, which extract the fields, as explained previously. We'll store it in Elasticsearch. And finally, Kibana will be the dashboard for this. What's interesting with this solution is that it's not a complete solution because you can, it's a complete solution, but you can use each component as a standalone component. For example, Logstash can be used with any backend. Kibana can be used for any Elasticsearch storage. It's not only ELK or ELK. It's a good solution for text events. But as we saw previously, it's not only about text. Other solutions that I don't know that much are Greylog and Fluentd. I've heard a lot of it. Yeah. And a reference here, which I recommend you, Awesome Sysadmin, who knows about it? Okay. It's a great collection of sysadmin tools for monitoring and other sysadmin stuff like mails, DNS, anyway. Okay, now a good solution which I recommend you for starting if you want to go inside of this monitoring world, it's this. So to explain you first, we'll take a look at the blue track. So the metrics are stored in Graphite. Behind this Graphite, we put StatsD so that, sorry for the photos. So that statsd makes the buffer for graphite. The metrics will come from collectd, which will poll your system every 5 seconds or 10 seconds, how you want, and push them to statsd. Symfony, we will see how later. Symfony will also extract metrics, push them to statsd, and that's okay. Regarding the events, which is the red track, Logstash reads your system service and application logs, push them to Elastic, and we have Grafana for the dashboard. Okay, I clearly recommend you to use Grafana instead of Kibana for many reasons. The first reason is that Grafana supports both backends at the same time. You don't need to have two Grafana. You can say, I have an Elasticsearch, I also have a graphic. This widget will be from Graphite, this one from Elasticsearch. Whereas Kibana only supports Elasticsearch, as far as, yeah. Also, on the usage side, I've tried both solutions, and clearly Grafana is better, is more usable and more comfortable than Kibana. So here is an example dashboard about metrics. Wow, graphs. And another dashboard with events. So this is coming from Elasticsearch. I will give you a little bit of my experience. It's a good fail. At the moment, I thought, hey, let's say that metrics are events. At some time, the system says my load average is that much. And instead of using a dedicated metric storage, I put everything in Elasticsearch. And as you can see, it's not so good idea, because every week I got more than 1 gigabyte of data. So yeah, I've not changed yet, but I need to change this. Okay, so avoid this. Metrics, events, two different worlds. Okay, we have seen what is monitoring, the solution that exists for monitoring. We even saw a small solution for starting, a good starting solution, open source and free. Now let's see what we need to monitor. There is a book I recommend to you if you love measure and analytics and things like that. It's called How to Measure Anything, and as the title say, we can measure anything. So at the question, what do we need to monitor? I would answer, monitor everything, because you can monitor everything. I talked about 3 different levels. The first one is the system level, so it's your operating system, your machine. The second is the service, Apache, MySQL, Docker, Nginx, all those applications that you use, but which are not your application. And finally, your application, your Symfony, lovely application. It is important not to only monitor your Symfony application. I talked to you a lot about the system and the services. The reason is that your application sits on top of them, and if your MySQL database is slow, your application will become slow. So measuring your application makes no sense if you don't measure what's below it. Here are some examples on the system. On the service side, also it's important to measure things. For example, the cache hit miss. The cache hit miss is an important ratio to measure. What it means, a cache hit is when your cache say, okay, you want this value? I have it, here it is. A cache miss is when your cache say, oh, I don't know about this value. And if your cache always gets hit, that's excellent. Your cache is used at 100%, and your application must, I hope, is performant because it always has a cache value. But if you only have missing values, your cache makes no sense. Because every time it asks to the cache, hey, do I have a value? No, I don't have. Oh, and it computes the cache. So measuring this value is very important when you have a cache system, to know the performance of your cache. That's the service side. Okay. Continue. And on your application, your Symfony application, what you can monitor? What you can monitor, it's what I call generic metrics. Like, for example, the memory and duration of every Symfony root of your application. You just implement one. It gets available for every metric. You can also track the usage of features. For those who were to the conference just before in the other track, it talks about A/B testing. So what you do with A/B testing is that you provide a feature to some user and not to some other. And what you can do with metrics that you can measure number of users using your feature. For example, you create a new feature and say, hey, my users will love it, and I will put it in production, and they will all be happy. You put it in production, and nobody use it. It's very important to know that, to know how your users behave in your application. And that's possible to do this with metrics system and metrics collection in your application. So that's the kind of usage that you can do. Other metrics that can be measured are anything. For example, registration or checkout process. If you're working in e-commerce or things like this, I'm sure that your company wants to track those metrics. How many people comes in the checkout process? When did they stop in the process? How many people left the checkout process? How long did it take for them to fill the forms, etc., etc.? That's a lot of information you want to know. Okay, and for the events, first put all your Symfony logs inside the solution. Track every critical error or warning message in your log. It should wake you up in the night. And also you can add some custom logs. We'll discuss it later. For example, you can just log the IP address, and with GeoIP know where the user is, and you can create a map of registration and say, 5 users registered in France. Checkout details, feature details, everything you want to log, you can log in Symfony log, get it in Elasticsearch, and start extracting information from it. It's very simple. Okay, time to show some code. Let's implement a generic listener for computing the memory and duration of every root. So what you do is that you create a new service, the metrics listener, which implements the event subscriber interface. I hope you're familiar with this. And what you do is that you inject your statsd client inside this service. There is the bit.ly link if you just want to copy-paste, because this is picture and you, okay. You subscribe to every event, request, response, terminate. It's very important it's part of the request lifecycle in Symfony. Who knows about the lifecycle of a request this events in Symfony? Cool. So you listen to request, response, and terminate. On the request, you start measuring. I want the time by now. I want the memory usage by now. I want the root name. You get those metrics. When you send your response to the client, you store the time and memory, the actual time and actual memory. And on terminate, which means after the response was sent to the client, you store them in the metric storage with the name being app root, for example, homepage duration, homepage memory. And by doing this, you have, for every root of your application, those metrics. You can add whatever you want using this principle, and it will be executed on each request. No need to implement it on each root. You do it, and every root benefits from it. Okay, so remember the bundle which I talked to you, and it's with 2 hearts from each side. For example, if you want to measure how many users use a feature, the good solution is not to inject the statsd client everywhere you want to get metrics from. The best solution is probably to use events. If you were at the conference of Samuel this morning, you've heard about Event Dispatcher. And what this bundle does is that it registers to some events, for example, the forum read event. And when this event gets fired, it will increment in statsd the counter. A very simple way and efficient way to measure your events in your application. So use events in your application. Okay, another good way to extract logs from your application is to use monologue features. In monologue, you can use channels to separate different types of logs. For example, at Auchan, we have a channel which is called deprecated, and this channel is used for every deprecated feature. By default, we have the Symfony deprecation logs, which comes in, but we also use this system for deprecation of our features. We work a lot with API, and for example, in an API, if we want to disable, we plan to remove a field, what we do is that we say, if I receive this field, then I will log on the deprecated channel that someone has used this field. We'll also log the username so that we can call the user and say, hey, you used this feature. We said no. So that's the deprecated channel. You can apply this system to a lot of things. You just log text in specific channels and you get it in your monitoring tool. To do this, it's a little bit tricky, but it works. In Monologue, you create a dedicated handler. We call it the deprecated handler. And we say just write it to the default log file. It's okay, the same as every other logs. And you register a service, deprecated handler here. And it's the same that is used in development. In development, you get notices for deprecated logs. It's the service that is used, so just reuse it to log every deprecated calls to the info channel, which gets inside your monitoring. Once again, you have the bit.ly link if you want to copy-paste. Easier than images. Okay, and now anywhere in the code, we just write this, someone, use something, and we'll remove it next to you. Okay. That's all for the what to monitor section. So first, don't forget to measure your system and service performance. It's very important. Keep an eye on your user behavior. How is he using your application? And also on every errors. You should handle every errors. It's not okay. For example, if someone say, "Oh no, I don't monitor system logs. There are too many errors." Yeah, but there is a reason. So if there are a lot of error logs, handle them, make them go 0, and from then you have a fresh start. Because when there is an error on your system, it's usually a problem below it. Okay. Alerting. It's not a bunny. Okay. Quick note on alerting. I won't talk a lot about it. It's nice to measure. It's better to be alerted. Having tons of metrics for everything is okay, but if you don't wake up in the night when there is a problem, that's useless, because you won't keep an eye on your monitoring dashboard every time. You should have an alerting solution. Don't put thresholds at 95%. It's a problem we had at Auchan. The alerting system was configured at 95%, but the problem is that when your hard drive is starting, for example, you have a log that goes crazy. When it ramps up and you get notification 95%, the time you take to open your computer and handle the problem is too late, 100%. And when your disk is full, system goes crazy. It's horrible to have a full disk because some MySQL writes are corrupted, things like this. There is no caching also because your system used the file system as a cache system. So it's horrible. I recommend you to put 60%. That's good. That's a good threshold. And yeah, handling the problem before it happens. Avoid recovering over a crash. Corrupted data is horrible. And beware of the alerting rules, because on work hours you will probably send mails, but at night you will send an SMS for waking up the person. You must also take care of the holidays. So when you choose an alerting solution, consider this. You will have a planning for the notifications. Okay, there is a feature which I did not have time to test because when I discovered Grafana probably a year ago, I think, there was no alerting feature. And 2 or 3 months ago, I looked again and Grafana still had no feature. But since version 3.1, there is alerting solution. This release is 3 or 4 weeks old, so it's very, very young. And by now, it only supports Graphite backend. So you cannot define alerting for Elasticsearch. It will probably come in the future, but for the moment, you cannot. And as you can see, you have a very nice user interface for defining vessels. It's very useful. So yeah, I must take a look. I must look deeper at it, but I wanted to share it with you. Okay, now let's talk about Auchan, which is my company. And the solution which we've chosen. Our stack is deadly simple and far away from what I've explained to you. The reason is simple. We are using a solution called Splunk. First, the metrics. For the metrics, we are using Zabbix. I've shown you previously what it looks like. And we use it for monitoring and alerting of system and services. Okay? Sorry. There are no application metrics extracted for the moment simply because we've not felt the needing for it yet. Using the events, we already track a lot of things, so we are mostly using text for the moment, not numbers, maybe later. So it's Zabbix because it's a very complete solution. And for the data, the text logs, we are using a tool called Splunk. Splunk is a little bit expensive, but it's an ELK stack with lots of cache effects. So what I mean is that ELK has some defaults and some lack of features. Splunk has them. Okay, I'm not paid for talking about Splunk. Just it's a tool that I really, really appreciate. Since I use it, I don't think I will be able to use other solutions. What's interesting with Splunk is that the whole company can use it. Compared to, for example, ELK, where you mainly get system metrics, Splunk provides features for the whole company to use it. So you can get business dashboard and system dashboard at the same time. You can make on-the-fly field extraction, whereas ELK, you must configure in Logstash which fields you extract. And one day, when you want to extract additional things, you need to reindex all the data through Logstash. Splunk does it on the fly. And it also has a beautiful interface where you put your regular expression. You say, OK, I take these logs, but those logs are not handled correctly. You change your expression, you refresh, you say, OK. There are this, you change, it's okay, everything is processed, fine. It has a powerful expression language, which I really miss with ELK solution, Kibana and Grafana solution. You can create search, combine it with a mathematic operation. You can make aggregation of queries. That's totally crazy what you can do with it. It has powerful graph construction tools. And a feature which I'm discovering recently, it's called data models. It's simply put, you categorize your data, your logs, and I would say, how do we call this? Chef de projet, project manager. And the project manager, which is not a developer or a technical guy, can create pivot tables from it. So it won't ask you, hey, can I have an Excel for my presentation? No, he can use Splunk directly. So it's very powerful, but very expensive. Sorry, I won't give the price because that's not my... Huh? Numbers. Oh, there is a free plan. Anyway, look at it, and if you're in a company, you might be interested. Conclusion. To summarize what I've talked about, the first thing I would say is track everything that changes. Everything that moves can help to understand the user behavior and take business decisions from it. Instrumentalize your application. Add metric extractors in your application. By using the system we saw with the request, use the events also. And track your critical business features. It's very important. For example, if your business depends of the advertising display, then add some metrics for advertising display information. Alert at 60%, not 95%. And my last one, if you have a lot of money, take Splunk. Okay. Thank you for attending.